Hello there, my name is Dr. Ted Wickstead from No Rest for the Scientist, and this episode is going to be a little bit of a quick update regarding one conspiracy theory in particular. As COVID-19 is currently taking over our entire lives, so are the conspiracy theories regarding it, and one in particular that is gathering a lot of surprising attention, let's say, is the link between 5G and coronavirus. Anyone with any grasp of biology and physics can immediately refute this conspiracy theory without even looking into the science. And that is what I'm going to start with here. It's easy enough to distinguish these two as completely separate entities. Before I kind of get into that, I want to quote Mark Twain of all people, whereby he said that a lie can travel around the world and back again before the truth even has the chance to lace up its boots. And that's really poignant to this theory, especially with the internet, whereby misinformation can be so easily widespread and almost become knowledge, even though it's fake. The sort of people that are kind of fueling the fire of this conspiracy are, well, actors really. You have people like Woody Harrelson, Amanda Holden, Wiz Khalifa, obviously a musician, and then people like AMIR as well, also saying that 5G is, coronavirus is fake, or coronavirus is caused by 5G. And last time I checked, they're not exactly gleaming examples of scientific excellence. AMIR as boxer probably wouldn't take my scientific advice from someone who gets perpetually punched in the head for a living. That's just me. But psychologically, I can understand why these might be taking hold. It's human nature that we want to have control over our own personal safety and security. And coronavirus is preventing us from doing that. We don't know what the future holds right now. We're all in isolation, should be, even though we don't want to be. And we don't know when it might end for some of us. And that might be quite scary. Okay, so before I get into the science in an interview basically separating 5G and coronavirus, there are obvious things that we can look at together and collectively to just kind of debunk the whole theory entirely. So at the moment there's around 34 countries in the world that have 5G capabilities and have 5G towers that are operational. However, confirmed cases of coronavirus have been reported in over about 120 countries, and the full list is available on the CDC website. Secondly, South Korea, I think, has the highest number of cities that currently have 5G towers and 5G operational capabilities, and yet South Korea is one of the countries with the lowest, one, COVID diagnoses, and two, COVID deaths. Surely that they would be associated together if there was some form of link. That's before even getting into the science of this problem. So instead of listening to people in interviews that aren't experts in the field, I thought it would be better, because by no means I'm no expert in this. I've read about it, I have a scientific background, that doesn't make me an expert. And I think that's important to clarify. Just because you've read a couple of articles online and you can debate a topic doesn't mean you know everything about it. And it would be wrong of me to sit here and tell you this and that without expert guidance on that. Because of that, I decided to set up an interview with someone who is an expert. So I set up a Zoom meeting with Professor Kenneth Foster, who works at the University of Pennsylvania and has been working on radio frequency, radio engineering and bioengineering for the best part of 50 years. His research interests relate to the biomedical uses of non-ionizing radiation, from audio all the way through to microwave frequency ranges, and the health and safety aspects of how electromagnetic waves interact with the human body. So I hope you enjoy this enlightening interview. Ken told me a lot. He is an expert in this area, and it was pretty cool to learn different aspects and get his view on this crazy theory. So enjoy the clip. Hey, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Good. So thanks very much for doing this.
An interesting project.
So can you tell me like a brief introduction about yourself while I go and discuss the 5G COVID-19 conspiracy that's going around?
Yeah, well, I'm a professor of bioengineering at the University of Pennsylvania, now emeritus. I've been at the University of Pennsylvania for something like 40 years. I got my PhD in 1971. Much of my research has involved health effects and medical uses of radio frequency energy. And I've been involved in committees that set exposure limits for RF, public communication efforts, et cetera, et cetera. So I've been involved in this field for many years.
So what is your take on the 5G COVID-19 conspiracy that's going around? And then kind of on top of that, why do you think it's taken off so dramatically in the past several weeks?
Okay, we need to be clear what we're talking about. 5G refers to a set of communications that lets cell phones communicate. So it involves signal processing of radio waves. 5G systems use radio waves in several frequency ranges, including those that are used by present cell phones, one that's slightly higher in frequency, and a third frequency band that's in what's called the millimeter wave range. So this is not one specific physical entity, but a technology such as GSM cell phones, 2G. I have been following this literature, this internet stuff on 5G and coronavirus, and it's bizarre. It makes no sense, totally unfounded, and it's just completely irresponsible as far as I can judge.
So why do you think, do you have any insight as to why it might have taken off so dramatically in social media, perhaps maybe during these times of isolation? It's because from my standpoint as well, from a biological standpoint, even though I'm a neuroscientist, I have some microbiology experience. It's crazy to think that this is going around and it's picking up so much traction. And I'm trying to sit there and understand why it has happened. And I'm kind of dumbfounded by it. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah. Well, for one thing, there's always been some apprehension in the public about radio waves. Cell phones first started rolling out in the early 2000s, late 1990s. And even then, people were protesting against cell base stations because of health concerns. And before that, people were protesting against microwave ovens because of health concerns. And before that, police radar sets. So from a risk perception point of view, there's something about radio waves that jerk people's chains. It's invisible. It's called radiation, even though the term here is just used technically to refer to energy that propagates through space. But there's been some level of public concern. There have also been a few scientists who've been raising the alarm about health effects of low-level radio waves. The literature is vast. At this point, people have been looking for hazards of radio waves since the 1950s, and all that they find are really mundane things. If you put a rat in a microwave oven, it's bad news for the rat. But the literature now has got several thousand papers of people doing all sorts of experiments, exposing all sorts of organisms to all sorts of radio waves, and most of them seem to find some kind of effects. But if you look at individual studies, either the effects don't have any clear relationship to human health, or the studies are somehow flawed and not blinded, or using improper dosimetry and so forth. So the literature is a real mess. And so anyone who wants to cherry pick can go through this literature and compile long lists of studies that, in their mind, show that radio waves are dangerous. This has been going on for many years. Meanwhile, health agencies have been constantly scrutinizing literature, and they don't see any reason that there's a problem, except at high levels. And this situation's been present ever since the 1960s.
So that's what I was going to say, was that I feel like if you kind of don't have experience in any scientific or engineering field, that you will cherry pick studies to kind of fit your argument. Whereas I think within our fields, we generally agree on the consensus, what there is available in widespread information. That's what we kind of go on. But I don't think that's always the case.
Even a few scientists are cherry picking. There is a report called the Bioinitiative Report by a group of self-selected scientists that make really frightening claims about radio waves. There's a retired professor from, I think, Washington State University, who's been going around for years saying that Wi-Fi, cell phones, cell base stations, et cetera, are deadly dangerous. And he's attributing these to everything from suicides and people working near base stations to, whatever. And so he's a scientist, has no experience doing research in this, but he's picked the literature and he's been making all these really outrageous claims. I don't think he's a troll, but I think he's just misguided. And people are worried about 5G because they see that that this is going to, when it rolls out, it's going to use what are called small cells, antennas mounted on top of street poles, basically. And so now we're looking at a whole new kind of infrastructure that's going to be installed in the cities. Verizon just installed them right down the street from where I live. That's a 30-meter, 20-meter pole with some antennas at the top. And so people are looking at this new infrastructure, and they're predisposed to worry about health effects, and there's a lot of public opposition. I don't want to dismiss it as being completely uninformed, but that's the way they feel. It's just that their concerns are not supported by health agencies. We probably need more research on health effects in millimeter waves, but since the energy doesn't penetrate the skin, there's not an awful lot that they can do. But The other thing that's happening now with 5G and this coronavirus is that there are, first of all, the activists who cherry pick the literature have this big echo chamber on the internet. There are all sorts of websites that they use to pass words back, stories back and forth. It's always been the case that if some high school kid thinks that their electric meteor has killed their geraniums, well, these websites will publicize that. And if some big study comes along and doesn't find any problem at all, they tend to ignore those. So there's this echo chamber. All these public concerns have been amplified because people who tend to believe them will follow what they want. It's the same as the anti-vax crowd. In fact, some of these anti-vax people are also the ones raising the alarm about 5G. And I think the other factor that's playing here is that there are trolls now capitalizing on this. I've read credible stories that there are state actors that are putting out trolling internet posts, some of which involve 5G. Russia, for instance, Russia Times magazine has been raising the alarm about health effects of 5G. This stuff is published. It's not just misguided people, but I think there are actors out there that are exploiting this. And so you have this emotionally fraught situation that people who are inclined to worry, and the internet amplifies these concerns. And it's the same thing that some years ago during the last presidential election, some people had the idea that Hillary Clinton was involved in child pedophilia in some pizza parlor. I think it was in Washington, in Brooklyn or someplace. And some people actually went out and invaded the pizza parlor because they believed what they read. And that was just a troll that would put out that false story. And the same thing's happening with 5G and coronavirus.
That's scary. So in that light then, is there anything people like us can actually do to kind of fight back against the spread of misinformation online? Or is there...
Well, what you're doing is exactly right.
Yeah.
I hope that a lot of people see your...
So do I. But on top of that then, what do you think members of the public can do? Like, what are good resources that they should kind of rely on for this sort of information?
Oh, standard journalists. I interact with journalists a lot, and the vast majority of them are competent people trying to do competent jobs, and the reporting generally is pretty good. Maybe they may take a different slant than what I would take, but there's been a lot of journalism that has been debunking this 5G coronavirus thing, and that's easy to debunk because that's such an incredible, off-the-wall, bizarre theory. So I think that the mainstream news is the key here.
Great.
Scientists should probably speak to the journalists, but scientists aren't necessarily very good at it. Scientists should write papers debunking this, but scientists aren't necessarily good at writing for the public. Scientific societies are taking positions. Health Physics Society just put out a post about 5G and coronavirus. But of course, the public doesn't read those. I would just advise people to subscribe to the New York Times and the Washington Post and their local newspaper and put their trust in that. And then also put their trust in what health agencies are saying. Great,
excellent. Okay, I won't keep you anymore, but thanks very much for your insight on that. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
So there you have it. Thanks again to Professor Ken Foster for providing such insightful information. The next video will primarily be looking at 5G as a whole and the proposed health effects that might be associated with it or not. So please do provide your questions or queries about this. Bronte and I will do a Q&A similar to what we did before. So yeah, let us know in your comments below. Please give us a like for this video and for the channel. Please subscribe. Until next time, ciao. And I want to provide a little bit of a quick update around one specific... I need to sneeze.